Domestic flights will resume on Wednesday. Flights will commence at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, and the Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos. The Port Harcourt, Owerri, and Maiduguri airports will begin operations on the 11th, while flights will resume in other airports across the country on the 15th of this month. Already, aircraft are undergoing thorough cleaning from nose to tail and disinfecting them after every turnaround. The procedure is for the safety of passengers. Passengers are advised to follow all safety guidelines and protocols put in place to ensure that the airports do not become channels for the spread of the coronavirus. Well, joining me now via Skype is Ayodele Adio, Managing Editor, the Avalon Daily. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's look at the situation on the ground now. Countries have begun to reopen, let's say, their borders. Let's looking at domestic flights now. Nigeria, for instance, has put measures in place to ensure the safety of passengers. And the WHO has called governments to ensure that these measures are effective. When you closely look at the measures Nigeria has put in place, how effective, from your point of view, are they going to be?
I think they have, taken a couple of, precautionary measures. The flight crew are supposed to be dressed in complete PPEs. The flights are supposed to be, in quote, disinfected. You're supposed to have alcohol-based sanitizers on board so that all passengers can use that before they go to their seats and before they disembark from the flight. You also have, an extra crew on board so that, the crew does not have to change, when they land at a particular airport. They do not need to leave the aircraft. That same crew can, do a turnaround back for their return flight. So I think on paper, they have taken very important steps to ensure that, the spread of this virus is essentially minimized. How this plays out is yet to be seen. But I'm slightly, or let me say, cautiously optimistic that, the guidelines that they have put in place will keep passengers safe for the meantime.
What concerns do you have? Because you say you're slightly optimistic and the plans put in place looks good only on paper, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm concerned not because of the quality of their guidelines, but I'm more concerned because it seems like we're not yet exactly sure how this virus typically behaves. I just read an article yesterday about a gentleman who wrote a very interesting article that he had taken every single precautionary measure. He had been isolating in his house for the past 2-3 months, working from home with his family. And for some reason, he goes out once every 2 weeks and somehow he got infected with the virus. He never went out without the mask. He ensured that all his domestic staff never came to work during the said period. And then, going out once a week and somehow he still caught the coronavirus. So I think I am cautious, optimistically cautious, because it seems like we do not know exactly how this virus behaves. So for some reason, there are some blurry lines, some gray areas where we really cannot totally explain how this thing is transmitted. So preventing it makes it a bit really difficult. And so while the guidelines are brilliant, while the guidelines were properly thought through to protect passengers, I remain cautiously optimistic that it would be as effective as possible because, like I said, nobody really knows how this virus behaves.
All right, so from what you have said, analysts rather have said that Domestic or air travel is vital to economic health as much as the public health from what we see on the ground now. So from what you are saying, striking a balance might be a huge challenge.
Listen, we're living in very difficult times now. It will be difficult because, like you rightfully said, air travel is a necessity for commerce and to help economic activities. To that extent, it is important that these airports are open so that business activities can continue and the economy can quickly catch up to speed, basically. Having said that, we still have to remain cautious, keep one of our eyes on the ball to ensure that where we open up the economy, where we open up businesses and where we open up trade, we do not drop the ball and let the health crisis consume us. I think we've been pretty lucky thus far. We've still had less than 30,000 cases. We've still not had up to 500 deaths. So I think we're still pretty much lucky. So what we must do is to keep these deaths minimal and to keep the rate of this infection as low as possible and not allow it to escalate to a point that it becomes almost impossible for us to handle. So to that extent, I think it is important that the economy continues to function, but individuals have to take personal responsibility for their safety.
Right.
You need to wear a mask. You need to ensure that you sanitize your hands. And I think the more citizens take personal responsibility for their health, and the more government does all it can to put some of these measures in place, I think we'll be fine in the long run.
All right. Ayodele Adio, we'll leave the conversation here for now. Thank you for speaking with us. Now, let's look at the passengers and perhaps Nigerians taking responsibility. On a daily, we see cases rising, and government has initially or will continue to speak about measures put in place in terms of social distancing and the use of face masks. And the question has been, how effective can this be, or how effective has it been, especially when we want to talk about taking responsibility at a time such as this, and we also looking at reopening or beginning domestic flights?
I don't think Nigerians have been compliant. If you go to the market, if you go to supermarkets, if you go to malls, just wherever you go to, you see a lot of Nigerians carrying about their daily activities without wearing masks. You see a lot of Nigerians who are acting very carefree, borderline irresponsibly. And I think this has aided the spread of this virus. So a lot of Nigerians have not really been taking a lot of personal responsibility for their safety. And not just their safety, the safety of other Nigerians in essence, because your inability to protect yourself also puts other people in harm's way. So I am not impressed with how Nigerians have behaved or are behaving during this period. And of course, it seems like government has also failed or is failing to enforce some of these guidelines. I know in states like Kaduna, they have set up mobile courts across the states to ensure that once you're in a commercial vehicle and you're not wearing face masks, you're immediately arrested and charged to the mobile court. That way, people are being more compliant. So I think that government needs to enforce some of these guidelines very, very, very seriously. Otherwise, this whole thing might snowball into a crisis that will go out of control.
And so with the way you have explained this, talking about how Nigerians are not really taking responsibility, what scenario do you see playing out at the airports?
There's this big man syndrome in Nigeria where the big man can get away with whatever he wants. And then you have this complex, by junior staff or by, proletariats in Nigeria where they are always subservient to the high and mighty. So I'm worried that, at the airports, you'd have a lot of people who will not find the courage to demand that people wear their masks and people maintain social distancing. So I'm really worried about that, and I hope that the people who will be working at the airport will have the courage to look at people in the eye, no matter how highly placed the individual is, to ensure that they are wearing their masks, to ensure that they maintain social distancing, and to ensure that no rules or none of the guideline is broken. Because I mean, you and I travel a lot in this country. People refuse to turn off their phones when they are on flight. People refuse to obey simple instructions. So it's going to be a pretty difficult one for these rules to be enforced, but I hope that most of these staffs have been properly briefed to ensure that, you know, they have some courage to tell people to do the right thing. Otherwise, they should just take their leave from the airports.
Ayodele Adio, we can only keep hoping. Thank you for speaking with us this morning.